Coming up on today's show, Dean Robertson is a retired evangelical minister. He has spent his entire adult life in Christian ministry in various capacities, including senior pastor, mission director, evangelist, and keynote convention speaker. He is also a studious biblical scholar. He has a master's degree in Intercultural Studies, and his international ministry has taken him to many areas of the world. He is the author of Sex Was God's Idea, an honest look at biblical sexuality and the rightful role of women. Welcome to Loving Without Boundaries, where we hear inspiring stories, share actionable advice, and talk about the challenges and the joys of ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. I'm your host, Kitty Shambliss. Coming up, my conversation with Dean Robertson. Welcome back to Loving Without Boundaries, where I am really excited to be here with Dean Robertson, who wrote a book I'm really excited about, frankly, called Sex Was God's Idea, an honest look at biblical sexuality and the rightful role of women. And this really speaks to me for many reasons, including I often jokingly say that I'm a recovering Catholic, and I'm sure this will probably come out in our discussion. But Dean, I just want to start by saying welcome to the show, and I'd love it if you'd introduce yourself in your own words to our listeners.
Yeah, thank you, Kitty. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you. My name is Dean Robertson. I'm a retired evangelical pastor. I raised in a very fundamentalist church and legalistic. And over the time of growing up and dealing with sexual issues, I never really was comfortable with the party line. One of the things growing up as a teenager, of course, teenage guy, who's interested in sex, and hearing all the time that, you can't have sex before marriage, and masturbation was going to send you to hell, and all the rest of it. And from a logical perspective, the sex before marriage thing always, put it this way, you have two people that are going to get married, and they're standing at the altar or wherever, and they haven't had sex, and a guy says a few words, they sign a piece of paper, they put a bit of steel on each other's fingers, and then go and have sex. And it's a beautiful thing. But if they did that before they had the steel on their finger and signed a bit of paper, it's a terrible thing, and they're going to go to hell. I thought that doesn't. There's not a lick of sense in that.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. I mean, because the way I look at it, I mean, if you are going to go with the traditional monogamous marriage concept, right? Like the rest of our lives is a really long time. And what if you're not sexually compatible? What if it doesn't quite work out? And then you just, devoted your whole rest of your life to that person. Doesn't make any sense to me either. So I couldn't agree more.
Right. But the other thing goes further because, I am a biblical scholar. I am, have no problem with the Bible at all, but I have a great deal of problem with the way the evangelical church interprets it. And especially on subjects like this. And so you go a step further and you say, well, okay, if sex outside of marriage is wrong, what is marriage? Let's find a definition of marriage in the Bible, and shock of all shocks, there is no definition of marriage given in the Bible. Every culture on the planet has a different definition of what marriage is. And even if there was some agreement on one of the definitions, the Bible nowhere says that sex is to be kept purely for marriage. It isn't there. So this is, the evangelical church has built a doctrine, so to speak, on sexuality that has no biblical base, and yet they claim their belief system is 100% biblical. And so through the years, as I had these thoughts, I never shared them publicly because I wanted to keep my job.
All right. I hear you. Yeah.
So I just noted it down and began to file. And when I retired, I had time to do more in-depth research into it. And even though I printed the book, I still see more stuff. I thought, oh man, I wish I could have included that in the book. And so the thrust of my book is 100% biblical. I'm not coming at it from a humanistic point of view, from an anecdotal point of view. You are the guys that believe that everything that we need for living is in the Bible. I'm going to show you from the Bible where when it comes to sexuality, you are 100% wrong. As simple as that. You have lied to the people. And not only that, man, the more I go into studying it, Kitty, the more I realize that these wrong notions on sexuality were rooted in misogyny and patriarchy as a way of controlling women. And all the teaching, pretty well all the teaching in the evangelical church, and I've got to keep saying, well, I say church, I'm referring to evangelical church. I know there's a lot of churches that don't subscribe to this, and I appreciate that. But all this submissiveness of a woman is totally contrary to the Bible and the character of God. It's all built in that. And of course, the translation of the Bible through the ages was done by men. And they made subtle changes. I remember this in the early church, there was a woman leader, pastor, and because the Hebrew word, has the male and female gender like French and Spanish, they changed it was Janus or something like Janus. They changed it from the feminine by changing one letter to the masculine, so that people would not know that there was a woman leader in the early church. Stuff like that, the subtle. And then if you go back and read, if you want to read stuff that's absolutely disgusting, you want to read what the early church fathers said about women. I mean, it is absolutely disgusting. And so and we could look back and say, oh, yeah, but that was 1,500, nearly 1,000 years ago. That's not now. Yes, but the whole of modern evangelicalism is built on that. Those guys laid the foundation stone of biblical interpretation. And so it's built on. And it's a long introduction. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's
Introduction.
fine. No, it's very clear that you have a lot of passion for this subject, as do I. I mean, I started this podcast back in 2015, and it was, very similar to you. I mean, growing up, I went to 12 years of Catholic school, and they literally taught us that, like you said, sex before marriage means you're going to hell. And if you identify as homosexual or gay, you're also going to hell. If you even think about masturbation, you're gonna go blind. Those are the things that I was taught as a young girl, and it took me decades to undo all of that. And so I partly started this podcast just to be able to have these frank conversations and to be able to talk about sex in a sex positive way to help release any shame, because I grew up with so much shame around that, as I'm sure a lot of other people did as well.
Look, yeah, and the thing that bothers me so much is one, you're dealing with that shame and guilt and all that, and that's why I've written the book. But the other part is how many millions of people, Kitty, have rejected the Christian faith because of that? They've rejected the love of God, and that's the one that makes me mad. Reject the church, yeah, that's okay. That's only man-made anyway. But the real body of Christ, the love of God living within us, and to reject that, it's a tragedy. I mean, it's terrible.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned that you're in a group of recovering Catholics, but I don't know if you're aware, there's groups out there now called Recovery Evangelicals. And it's very interesting. I'm not in it, but I get the publications that, they're online, and they come out with some good stuff, really good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. No, I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for sharing that with me. So I'd love to ask when did you like realize, maybe if we talk about a light bulb moment, it sounds like when you were a young teenage boy, you realized that you didn't really align with some of these things that you were being taught. Was there another, like a couple different, maybe big light bulb moments for you in your life when you realize that the way you were being taught traditional evangelical biblical studies just wasn't aligning with your own thought processes?
Yes and no. Well, it's one by one, right? That there's a technical marriage and masturbation with two back there, but and as it's growing, I've gone to the other things like pornography and stuff like this. That the evangelical church is totally, I can get back to that in a minute and talk to you about the thoughts I had. But one of the light bulbs that did come on was actually recently, just before I wrote the book, because and it was the subject of nudity, and the Garden of Eden is what God wanted life to be, paradise. And when they have these hedonistic adventures down in the Caribbean and places like that where people can just be free to express themselves, really, that's about as close as the Garden of Eden as you're going to get in this world. And yet the church would think all those people are going to hell. That was God's idea. His idea was for everybody to be naked. And so we come to this thing, well, we're ashamed of our nakedness because we sinned. But then I read a book by a woman, a Lutheran pastor, I think she's in Colorado. Her name is Nadia Bolsa-Weber. She wrote a book called Shameless, a Sexual Revolution. And she brought out a concept that I never had thought of before. She talked about the fact that, okay, Adam and Eve ate the apple, and then they realized they were naked, and they clothed themselves and hid themselves. God came in the evening and said, "Where are you? And why have you hidden yourselves?" And that they said, "Because we were naked and ashamed." And God said, "Who told you you were naked?" In other words, where did the source of the shame come from? Well, there's only one other entity in that story. There's God, there's Adam and Eve, and there's the serpent representing Satan. So that was the accusation that Satan threw at them after they eaten it. Now you're to have shame. And God's basically saying, that wasn't my idea that you be shamed with your nakedness. So, and that's to light bulbs coming off.
Yeah.
Well, you pretty light bulb for me, honey. They were a big time for that.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that you shared that. I wasn't aware of that, and that really resonates with me. That it's a concept I talk about. That that in my way of thinking, we weren't born feeling shame. We're almost taught to feel shame, and so it can be such a draining, self-destructive emotion, especially if we wallow there too long. But if we are really in a sex negative world, it's really creating more and more shame around that.
Exactly. And the thing that is always amazed me is little children. If you've had children, this, you don't have any shame running around naked. But to add to that, they have no shame running around naked when everybody else in the room has clothes on. So you think seeing everybody else with clothes on would give them
Right.
And so you come back to the fact that you say nakedly came into the world, and we'll believe it. God's idea was not that we wear clothes. And then the other thing that really helped is, I have my master's in Intercultural Studies. I'm all being very interested in other cultures. And when you look at the subject from a non-Western culture, it's really fascinating. I mean, we were talking about nakedness. Well, the ancient Polynesians, the ancient Hawaiians, weren't allowed to wear clothes. Only royalty were allowed to wear clothes. And if you wore clothes, you were punished because you're trying to be like the king or the queen. And, it was, it was against the law. So, and then you run this whole thing of marriage through whatever, through all the different cultures of the world. And the diversity there is unbelievable. And what we have tried to do when missionaries go to any part of the world, impose, instead of just teaching concept of Christ within their culture, we therefore try to westernize their culture. I remember I went to third world country. My best friend was a missionary there, and there was polygamy, and I was in theological college, and he got married. He married a missionary nurse. I want to be best man. So I asked him, "What's the stance?" And most of the missionaries there were from America, but that wouldn't have made any difference. What's the stand on polygamy?
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, what we do when a guy becomes a Christian, he can keep his wives, but he only has sex with the first wife." Well, that's brilliant. That's the good news of the gospel of Christ. If you happen to be one of the other wives, you're not going to get sex again as long as you live. You're not going to have any children. That really is Christian knowledge.
Oh, yeah, of course. No, that doesn't make any sense at all. And it also, when we're talking about polygamy in that sense, it sounds like it's only when it's one man with multiple women. Is that
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's correct. But there's a lot of cultures know our still the way around. Several men sharing one woman, and we come back to it. If you're coming back to a scriptural point of view, there was no condemnation or law against that, and even the polygamy with many wives. Well, in all the Old Testament, all the old patriarchs and prophets, they all had, most of them did anyway, several wives. So there's virtually, when you think about it, there's hardly anything that we equate with marriage in our culture that has any scriptural foundation. None. The only one that has a scriptural foundation, and which when Paul said, husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Absolutely on the money. That's the only thing. Now, of course, he said right afterwards, wives submit to your husbands, but he didn't say that. That's what the translators said he said. He
Right,
didn't
right.
say that. Well, the word that he used was the word that a Roman soldier uses to his armor bearer. In other words, stand by me. We're in this together. I have a role. I wield the sword. You carry the armor. We're in it together. We're a team. It does not mean subjection. But apart from his statement of husbands loving wives as Christ loved the church, there's nothing else in our context of marriage that has any biblical foundation at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that as well. And if somebody wanted to look at the original scripture before all the translations, is that possible to be done, or all the interpretations and the translations?
Here's the problem, and a lot of people say, "Oh man, I'm going to learn Greek or I'm going to learn Hebrew, so I can out that." That really wouldn't help you one little bit, because all languages the culture is part of the language, or the language is part of the culture. So you can say a word means this, but what does that mean in that culture? Now, I'm going to give you an example. We go back to, I don't know how much of the Bible you know, but you know the story of Ruth and Naomi back in the Old Testament?
Maybe if you
And
start speaking it, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. And so, I'm not going to the whole story, it takes too long. His Ruth, an Israelite, and her mother-in-law Naomi, and their husbands both died, and they needed to. And here's the other thing too. We have no idea what the role of a woman in those cultures were. They had to have children. They had to have a son. They couldn't own anything. They couldn't own even the clothes on their back, and they had less rights than your dog has and my cat has in today's world. And so getting a husband was paramount importance. And so there was a relative called Boaz who was a big farmer. And Ruth went out, and they're gleaning, and then they had a big festival. And Naomi said, I can go to the festival and lie at his feet, because they slept overnight. Well, come to find that lie at his feet is a euphemism for having sex, actually uncovering his genitals for having sex. So it's like we say, or Jack and Jill split with each other. We know not much sleeping took place. So we come back. we come back to the principle, you could be an expert in Hebrew or Greek language and still not understand these euphemisms and the ways of the culture. So it's understanding the culture which is we don't have today, And that's I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but
No, I think it does. It's very helpful. Yeah. And I mean, it's also just fascinating talking to you since you've done both the intercultural studies as well as all the biblical scholarship work that you've done. So that's incredible. I'd love to understand, like, when was your epiphany that you wanted to write this book? Was there a moment that you realized that this needed to be written?
yes, and my wife helped me. I've been putting it off and on and off and on, and I went to church. I'm retired, was not involved in the church, and the pastor preached on lust, and I came away so angry, and my wife said to her, "How can a guy with a doctorate degree in theology and biblical studies not understand what lust is?" And her words to me, it's time you wrote that book. And I thought, yes, it is. And we equate the word lust with sexual desire. I challenge anyone that's listening to this to take the most authenticated source of an English word, which is the Oxford English Dictionary. Look up the word lust, and there's not one single reference to anything sexual in it at all. Lust means a compulsion to have or compulsion to do, a driving force. Now, it could be in the area of sex, and often is. But what is so often, especially with guys, I mean, it could be with women as well, I understand, but they're really guys. Oh, you wicked person, you're suffering from lust. And all a guy has is a natural sex drive given to him by God. And you want to condemn him for that. If a guy has and we're a woman, I keep saying guy, please forgive me, um, you know, a strong sex drive, that is not lust. That's just an extra strong sex drive. The person's not responsible for that, and God made it, and you made me in the image
Exactly.
of God.
Exactly. I say that all the time. So I'm right there with you, just in terms of remembering that we were given these bodies for pleasure, to enjoy the body that we were born with. It's a gift, right? So it's important to be able to honor it. Yeah.
And especially when there's a part of the woman's anatomy that has no reproduction purpose at all other than pleasure. Well,
Right.
who made that? Who
Right.
created
Exactly. Mhm.
So that, and when you asked, say, for epiphanies, the light coming on, that was what made me read the book. I just was fed up. I just had enough, So I'll write it. Here we are.
Well, I'm so glad that you did. So I'm curious, Dean, how long did you spend writing this book?
Once I had decided to do it, it's not a long book. It's only about 120 pages. It really was natural. The time was more in the editing and all that kind of stuff, backwards and forwards with the publisher. That's the thing that is a pain in the neck. But it didn't really take me that long because I had so much of it in my head and heart, I just let it go. And but as I say, probably a year or two, I'll do a second edition, and
Oh, that's
there's just a
amazing.
lot more. There's a
Mhm.
lot more stuff keeps. I'll tell you something that I didn't realize, Kitty. We come back to this feminine and masculine idioms within the language. I didn't realize Hebrew. I never studied Hebrew to Greek. I thought it was a waste of time because, like I said, the problem is not an understanding what the word is. Then any translator can tell you what that is. It's understanding it in the context of the culture. But anyway, of all the names of God, Yahweh is probably the most popular. YAHWAH. I did not realize until recently that Yah is feminine, Way is masculine, and Ru, which is the Hebrew word for the Spirit of God, is feminine. To myself, here I am in retirement. I mean, a whole year as a pastor, my whole life as a pastor, and I didn't know that, no, because it was conveniently never revealed to us.
Wow, that is fascinating. That's been a big moment, like a surprise moment for you.
Well, there's another thing that, you know, you take the creation story, and whether people believe it or not is not relevant. So let's just assume you believe it, which I do. If you look at that creation story, it's a transcending order. It starts with nothing, the planets and the ocean and the world, and then the next stage. And I say stage because this idea that it was 24 hours a day is nonsense. It's a period of time. So we go up to the next period of time, and God creates the vegetation and trees, and then animals, and then finally man, male, and then finally female. Now, anyone with any sense of reasoning can look at that and say that is a transcending order. Everything that God made was a higher order of what was under it. So now you go up and he made man as a male, and he made female, and you try to tell me that female is supposed to be subservient to man. I've known men that said, "Oh, no, well, God made man first, so therefore he dominates woman." Oh, he made animals before man, so that means animals dominate you? You know, with the transcending,
Right. Mm.
why can't you understand that? And then we come to once again, interpreted, translated by man. God said, let's make man a helper. He never said that. That's in the English. What he said, the word he used was not helper. It was more closely resembled in the Hebrew, mostly used, savior. He needs someone to rescue him from himself. So conduct a wedding ceremony, I tell the people that, and they all laugh. I think, women have known that since the beginning of time, and are finally waking up to it. And the thing that surprises me, Kitty, is the comments that I get after a wedding service making comments like that come primarily from the men who say, I'm just so glad you said that stuff. I hate this woman subservient nonsense that's propagated in the evangelical church. So God was saying, and then you say, well, why did the tempter go to Eve instead of Adam? Well, the tempter saw her as the top dog. That's why. If Adam was the top dog, then he would have had to do a number on Adam. But he knew if he had Eve, because she was the top dog, that Adam would follow along behind. So the whole, thing. Here's the other thing too. You have two boys that are going off fishing. They got the poles and the tackle and all that stuff. Okay, you're going down the river to go fishing, two of them. So which one of you is the leader? Which one's the boss?
That's a
What would
great.
they, what would they say? They'd look at you like you had horns on your head and say, "What are you talking about?"
Right, right.
And when you have two people, it's a partnership. One is not the leader. One is not the boss. One is not subservient. It's an equal partnership.
Hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
No, don't be. Your passion is amazing, and I love hearing your passion, and even especially that you are a retired minister. I think it's great that you're at a place in your life where you can be sharing this, and it sounds like it's something that has angered you or bothered you for so many years, decades even, and you are able to put that knowledge, get it out of your head, and put it in this book, which is just incredible. Um, I'd love to ask, who would you say you're welcome. Who would you say would be, who might really be interested in reading this book? Who would you say this book is either written for or might really benefit?
It's geared for almost specifically, specifically for evangelical fundamentalists, or those people who were, like you, or maybe, raised in the church with all this false teaching, and, still either one, feel guilty about what they've done or are doing, or they just have rejected God completely, say God must be, this is not possible, I can't live like this. Um, And hopefully, in the New Testament, I found this just the day before the book went to publication. I said, "Oh, stop! I got one more thing I got to put in there." The word liberation appeared 45 times in the New Testament. Now, when I read that, I thought, I don't even know one time when it's interpreted, where I've seen the word liberation. And then it said, but the word has been interpreted as salvation because the translators wanted mankind to concentrate on the afterlife and not the present life. And so they translated salvation instead of liberation. And the whole point is Christ came to set us free from bondage. Simple as that. By the way, I love the title of your organization, your group. If I was ever start another church, I think I'd have to borrow the title off you.
Well, I'm glad you love it because it just you feel like it kind of coincides nicely with the way that you think about love and just being expansive.
And that's the essence of the Christian faith. The guy came to Jesus and said, "What commandment shall I be keeping?" He said, "Well, keep them." He said, "No, but what's the real important one? Love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself," which is what is the essence of the Christian faith. But here's the point that people miss. So often when people quote the Bible, they quote just one verse like I did, and they don't even read the verse next after it. And Jesus said right after it, because on this hangs all the law and the prophets. In other words, what Jesus was saying, everything that was in the Old Testament and all the law and all the prophets are all trying to say this one thing: love without boundaries. That's what they try to say. That's exactly what he was saying. So if you come up with something that contradicts what I'm saying about that, but what about this? What about it?
Right,
That's not the issue. The issue is loving without boundaries. It's as simple as that is the essence of the Christian faith. Pure and simple.
That's fascinating. I never would have thought that. So you've given me a great epiphany on this call too. So a new way to think about that. Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm glad that it moved you so much. And I guess that was one question I was curious about. How did you come across me and my work?
I did a podcast for CDC. You familiar with them?
Yes.
Sorry, SDC.
Oh,
And
STC.
I
Yes.
actually, yeah, with the same thing. I asked them to promote a book for me, and they sure they put it on, but then they wanted to do a podcast, and you know what it's like on the internet. Once you pull up something, similar organizations come up, and so your one came up, and I thought, man, that's a great title.
That is so cool. Yeah, exactly. I guess here in my home, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, but Kitty, that's how the church originally started. It wasn't home. That's where it's supposed to have stayed. And all that we think of as a church today is pretty well all man-made after Constantine. For 300 years, no church buildings. They were all in homes. What you said was actually, look what I'm trying to think of, on the money.
Oh, on the money. Well, thank you. Yeah, and we really believe in that concept in terms of that love is expansive and that we can breed more love in a way. So yeah, we have several adults that live in this household, and we really believe in making a house a home and having as much love and kindness as possible. So I think it's really great to be having this conversation with you. It's so beautiful. I'd love to ask how long has your book been out?
It's been out about a year and a half. But I just, I'd like to, it hasn't really got up to speed yet, but and I guess it's hard to. It's kind of a catch-22 position. I have a very best friend who was a pastor, retired, bombed out, got into swinging, and we've had a lot of good conversations. But I said to him, I'm in a catch-22 position because I can't advertise the book through to traditional Christian sources because they'll disagree with it. And the people that actually have freed from that, they're kind of probably not that interested. And he said, no, they're already free. Up to, yeah, I know. So that's my catch-22.
Oh, that's funny.
So, but
Yeah.
I do believe that there's a lot of people that maybe out there the background was in the restrictive religious teaching, or those that have rejected the gospel, which is a real shame. And so I think there's a large audience out there that
Yeah.
hopefully would take advantage of it.
Yeah, well, I'm really loving the conversation and what I've read through the book so far. So I'm just really thrilled for you that you've had these different epiphanies and ideas that you wanted to share, and that you took the time to write the book. So I think that's just really, really awesome, and I'm glad that you are here. I'd love to ask, is there any question that maybe I didn't ask you, or any parting words or anything that you'd like to share, like in terms of maybe what your goals are for this piece of work, or what comes up for you?
I would encourage as many people as possible to read the book. And the website is real simple, easy to remember. sexwasgodsidea.com, and that'll click you straight over to Amazon if you decide you want to buy the book. And it's not really expensive. I mean, got $16 or Kindle. It's not much. And then if someone does read the book and find it helpful, Kitty, I think it would be great if they were able to do a review on Amazon, so other people could be helped as well. And just to, when they, my whole purpose is to help as many people as possible find the truth. As simple as that.
Yeah,
And
that's beautiful.
anything we can do to propagate that would be great.
Oh, that's an amazing mission. I love that. So, to help as many people as possible find the truth, and I'm happy to share this message here with our website, Loving Without Boundaries, and we'll also and I can say, from having written my own book as well, Jealousy Survival Guide: How to Feel Safe at Being Secure in an Open Relationship, which also is a relatively short book, that getting those reviews is really, really helpful. So yeah, I would just want to underscore that. Yeah, if anyone does read the book, please just write a really quick review on Amazon. It doesn't have to take that long. And boy, is it really helpful to, as you said, Dean, get the word out. And I really appreciate all the beautiful work that you've done here. And my last question I would say is, yeah, what would you say is next for you? I think you said you wanted to write another book. Is that right?
Probably not yet. I just, would like to get this one really moving, and then if it did, when you said another book, you mean another edition or on another subject?
Either one. Either one.
Yeah, no, probably not. No. So like someone said, writing the book is the easy part. Getting it out there is the difficult part. And
Yes.
that is daunting. And like as I said, if anybody listeners could read it or promote it or find avenues that it could be promoted, that would really be helpful.
Awesome. Awesome. And what before we say goodbye here, what has been some of the response so far? Have you gotten some good responses and even some not so good responses already?
Well, the reviews I've had have been great, except for one. There was one guy that obviously he's on the other side of the river on this, and I'm obviously going to go to hell. But most of the others, if you pull them up, and then any old woman, which is really good.
Oh, wow.
Really positive reviews. Which I appreciated. But it's just getting the word out there. So really.
That's awesome. Well, I will go ahead and say the name of the book again. It is Sex Was God's Idea: An Honest Look at Biblical Sexuality and the Rightful Role of Women, by Dean Robertson. And Dean, I just want to thank you again for your time and your attention and your care in putting this book together, and sharing some of your background and your wisdom with us here today. It's been really a pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you so much, Kitty, for your kindness. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you like what you heard, are struggling with some aspect of your relationships, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit to work with me as your relationship coach, here's what I invite you to do next. Head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. That's lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply, and book a call to speak with me. I'll get on the phone with you for about 45 minutes, and we'll get you crystal clear on 3 things. Number 1, exactly what's not working well in your relationships right now. Number 2, ideally where you'd like to be and what might be getting in the way. And number 3, the exact strategy to get you there, helping to close that gap. Remember, creating healthy, open relationships does not typically happen by itself. Many often need expert guidance to make it happen. We've helped clients all over the world to feel safe, happy, and secure in open relationships, while not losing their mind or their cherished partners. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. I'm Kitty Chambliss, and let's talk soon.